The first thing Daniel Whitmore saw was his 6-year-old grandsons sleeping under a thin blanket in the backseat of an old sedan, parked at the far end of the airport lot. He froze. His son Michael was sitting in the driver's seat, staring at the ground like he was ashamed to even be seen. "Michael, what happened?" Daniel asked. His son avoided his eyes. "Dad, please don't ask." But Daniel had to. Because the man sitting in front of him was the same son he had invested $300,000 in. The same son who built a startup from nothing. The same son who once promised his children would never struggle the way he did. Daniel looked around the car. The blankets. The bags. The empty food containers. "Where is the money I invested in your company?" Daniel asked. Michael finally broke. "My wife and her family took everything." Daniel felt the words hit harder than he expected. Victoria Whitmore had spent months telling everyone that Michael was unstable, that he had made reckless decisions, that his own mistakes destroyed the company. But now Daniel was looking at his son sleeping in a car with his twin boys, and something did not make sense. A man who had truly lost control did not remember every detail of his business. A man who was careless did not keep documents hidden. And when Michael reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a small envelope, Daniel realized there was a story nobody had heard. Inside were papers connected to the company transfer. Papers showing ownership had moved to someone else. Someone in Victoria's family. Daniel opened the first page and felt his hands tighten. His son had not simply failed. Someone had made sure he looked like he did. Daniel Whitmore had spent most of his life fixing problems. For 35 years, he worked as an aerospace engineer, solving complicated issues that most people never saw. After losing his wife several years earlier, protecting his family became the center of his life. Michael was his only son. When Michael came to him with an idea for a technology startup, Daniel did not hesitate. He invested $300,000 because he believed in him. "This is your chance to build something your boys can be proud of," Daniel had told him. And for years, it seemed like everything was working. Michael built the company. The business grew. His twin sons had a stable home. Then, suddenly, everything disappeared. Calls went unanswered. Messages became shorter. And eventually, Michael told his father he was figuring things out. Daniel never imagined that meant sleeping in an airport parking lot. Now, standing beside that car, Daniel knew there was more to the story. Because Michael was not acting like a man who had destroyed his own life. He was acting like a man who had been pushed out of it. And when Daniel asked why he never told him what Victoria had done, Michael looked toward his sleeping sons and whispered, "Because she made sure nobody would believe me." Daniel barely slept that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the image of his grandsons curled up in the backseat of that car. The next morning, Michael sat quietly at Daniel's kitchen table while the twins ate breakfast in the next room. Daniel placed a cup of coffee in front of him. "Start from the beginning," he said. Michael looked down. "Dad, I know what it looks like." "No," Daniel replied. "I know what it looks like to find my son living in a car. What I don't know is how it happened." Michael took a long breath. For months, he explained, Victoria had been controlling the story before he even realized there was a story. Whenever Michael questioned missing money from the company accounts, she told him he was overreacting. Whenever he asked why her parents suddenly had access to financial records, she accused him of being paranoid. Then she started telling other people that he was struggling mentally. "She told my friends I was obsessed with the company," Michael said. "She told investors I was making emotional decisions." Daniel frowned. "But you knew exactly what was happening." Michael nodded. "I knew something was wrong. I just couldn't prove it." He explained that weeks before he lost control of the company, he discovered unusual transfers leaving the startup accounts. Money was moving into accounts connected to Victoria's family. He confronted her. Instead of answering, she called him unstable. Daniel watched his son carefully. The details were too organized. Michael remembered dates, amounts, and conversations without hesitation. A man who was confused would not be able to explain every transaction. Later that afternoon, Daniel searched through old emails Michael had saved. Then he found something. A message from Victoria to her parents. The subject line read, "Finally secured." Daniel opened it. The message thanked her parents for helping protect the future of the company. His stomach tightened. But before he could ask Michael what else he had found, Michael's phone suddenly buzzed. It was Victoria. Michael looked at the screen and went silent. Daniel watched his son's expression change. "What did she say?" Daniel asked. Michael slowly turned the phone around. Victoria had sent only one message. "Bring my children back, and tell your father to stop interfering before he makes things worse." Then another message appeared. One sentence that made Daniel realize Victoria was not afraid of him at all. "You have no idea what your son is capable of." Daniel had spent his entire life avoiding unnecessary conflict. But this time, staying quiet meant allowing someone else to destroy his son's name. 2 days later, Daniel walked into a conference room where Victoria, her parents, and several former business associates were waiting. The atmosphere changed the moment he entered. Victoria sat confidently at the table. She did not look worried. She looked prepared. "Daniel," she said calmly, "I hoped you would understand that Michael needs help, not encouragement." Daniel stared at her. "My son is sleeping in a car with his children, and you want to talk about him needing help." Victoria folded her hands. Because he made decisions he refused to accept responsibility for. Her father nodded beside her. The company was struggling because Michael could not handle pressure. Daniel looked around the room. Everyone there seemed to already believe the same story. That was when he realized Victoria had not just taken control of the business. She had taken control of the narrative. Daniel placed the documents from Michael's files on the table. "Then explain this." Victoria glanced down. Her expression barely changed. "These are misunderstandings." "Misunderstandings?" Daniel asked. "Why does your family now control the company my son built?" The room went silent. Victoria's father shifted in his chair. Daniel had found the missing piece. The startup had not disappeared. It had been renamed, reorganized, and absorbed into a company connected to Victoria's family. The people in the room thought Michael had simply walked away. But Daniel knew better. Someone had removed him. Victoria leaned forward. "You are making a serious mistake defending him." Daniel looked directly at her. "No, I made a mistake trusting your version of what happened." The meeting ended without an apology. But as Daniel walked outside, a former employee approached him quietly. Her name was Sarah, and she had worked with Michael since the beginning. "I shouldn't be telling you this," she whispered. Daniel stopped. "What do you know?" Sarah looked around before answering. "I saw Victoria's father moving files before Michael lost access. They changed permissions. They locked him out." Daniel felt his suspicion become something more. Evidence was starting to appear. "But there's one thing missing," Sarah said. "What?" "The original financial records." Daniel waited. Sarah lowered her voice. "If those records still exist, they will show exactly who took control of the company." Then she looked toward the building behind them. "And I think I know where Victoria hid them." Daniel knew they had finally reached the point where words were no longer enough. Victoria had spent months building a story. Michael was unstable. Michael made bad decisions. Michael lost the company. But Daniel now understood that the truth would not come from arguing. It would come from evidence. That evening, Daniel and Michael returned to the storage unit, where Michael had kept the remaining pieces of his old business. Boxes filled with old contracts, equipment, and documents sat untouched. Michael searched quietly. "I thought everything important was gone," he said. Daniel looked at him. "Someone wanted you to believe that." After nearly an hour, Michael pulled out an old piece of equipment hidden beneath several boxes. A company backup drive. His hands shook as he connected it to the computer. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then the files appeared. Financial records, emails, transaction histories. Daniel and Michael began reviewing the information. The first discovery was enough to make Michael step back. Money had been transferred from company accounts into accounts connected to Victoria's family. But then they found something even worse. Several documents showed approvals with Michael's signature. Only Michael had never signed them. He stared at the screen. "She didn't just take the company," he whispered. Daniel looked at the documents. "She tried to make it look like you gave it away." Michael sat back, realizing the trap had been much bigger than he imagined. Victoria had not only removed him, she had created a trail designed to make him look responsible. Daniel immediately contacted a business attorney. After reviewing the evidence, the attorney gave them a warning. "If these documents are authentic, this changes everything. But you need to move carefully. Once Victoria realizes you have this, she may try to protect herself." Daniel did not have to wait long. That same night, his phone rang. It was Victoria. Her voice was calm. "Daniel, I know what you and Michael are doing." Daniel remained silent. "You need to stop interfering in my family." "My family?" Daniel asked. Victoria ignored the question. "If you continue, I will fight for custody of the boys." The threat hung in the air. Daniel looked across the room at Michael and his grandsons. This was no longer only about a stolen company. It was about protecting two children who had already lost their home once. The next morning, the attorney called. "There is one more file on that backup drive." Daniel opened his computer. The file had no name, only a date. He clicked it. For a few seconds, there was nothing but silence. Then a recording began playing. A familiar voice filled the room. "Victoria." And the first words she spoke revealed that everything Michael had been accused of was a lie. The recording changed everything. Daniel sat completely still as Victoria's voice played through the speakers. At first, it sounded like an ordinary business conversation. Then the details became impossible to ignore. Victoria and her father had been planning the takeover long before Michael lost control of the company. They talked about moving assets, changing access permissions, and creating a version of events where Michael would look responsible for the collapse. They knew exactly what they were doing. They knew Michael would question the missing money. They knew he would try to expose them. And they knew the easiest way to stop him was to make people believe he was the problem. The worst part was hearing Victoria discuss his mental state. Not because she believed it, because she planned to use it. "He won't be able to convince anyone if they already think he's unstable," Victoria had said in the recording. Daniel looked at his son. Michael covered his face with both hands. For months, he had been fighting a battle where everyone around him had already decided he was guilty. But now the truth was finally visible. Michael had not destroyed his company. He had discovered someone else was destroying it. With the recording, financial documents, and backup files, Daniel and Michael took everything to their attorney. The investigation moved quickly. Financial records were reviewed. Company transfers were examined. Documents that appeared legitimate were analyzed. And slowly, the story Victoria had built began falling apart. The company Michael created had not failed. It had been taken. Former employees who had stayed quiet began speaking up. They admitted they noticed unusual changes before Michael was removed. Investors who believed Michael abandoned the business realized they had been misled. The same people who once questioned Michael's judgment began asking Victoria questions she could not answer. Her confidence disappeared. The image she carefully protected for years was gone. Victoria and her family lost control of the company. The transfers they made were challenged. The false documents became part of a legal investigation. And the accusations they used against Michael became evidence against them. But the most emotional moment happened away from the courtroom. It happened when Victoria finally met Michael face to face. She stood across from him, expecting anger. Instead, Michael was calm. "You made everyone think I was broken," he said. Victoria looked away. "You made my children think their father couldn't be trusted." For the first time, she had no explanation. Michael continued, "I'm not doing this because I hate you. I'm doing this because my sons deserve the truth." Daniel watched his son carefully. The man he found sleeping in an airport parking lot was different now. Not because he had gotten revenge. Because he had finally stopped allowing someone else to define him. Months later, Michael and his sons moved into a new home. The boys no longer carried their belongings in backpacks. They no longer slept in the backseat of a car. Michael started rebuilding his career, using everything he learned from losing his first company. Daniel helped where he could, but he understood something important. His son did not need someone to save him. He needed someone to believe him. Daniel also changed. For years, he thought protecting family meant keeping peace. He thought love meant trusting the people closest to him without question. But that experience taught him something different. Sometimes protecting your family means confronting the person hurting them. Sometimes the hardest truth comes from the person you trusted the most. And every time Daniel passed that airport parking lot, he remembered the day he found his son sleeping in a car with his grandsons. Because that was the day everything looked lost. But it was also the day the truth finally began coming out. Michael did not lose his family. He lost the people who were pretending to be one. And in the end, he gained something Victoria could never take away. The chance to rebuild a life based on the truth.